This is the FMS FCX10 LC80. I used to have one of these and I quite like the car. When I say scrabble, one wheel lost traction just the tiniest bit. I think you'll scrabble a bit more, but you should be fine.
Cool.
And I'm up, Tim, you go for it.
Right.
Or I can get a video if you want to wait, up to you.
Yeah, right.
Alright, just give me a sec. Today this thing will join the list of cars that have done my 6 problem course, where we can compare how it drives, can it do all 6, if it can't, where does it get stuck. This is the comparison video where we can use this to evaluate how the car can crawl against other cars that have been tested. Check my videos below if you're interested. We have almost every crawler on the market in 110 scale, or at least something from its family. I've got a significant catalogue now, so we can see just how this thing ranks. Let's get to it. Well, we've seen how FMS's new beauty runs in an RC crawling competition, fresh out of the box. But if you saw my last video about this car, you will have noticed that it wasn't exactly stock. I had to put smaller tyres on to make it consistent with the rules. And I also changed the bull bar, which was an aesthetic decision, which I kind of regretted, as you might have seen if you, if you saw the video. And I also had a couple of extra bits on the top here just to help with some scale points. Today, I've returned the thing to stock. So the fruit is gone from the top. The machine now has its stock wheels on, which I haven't shown on camera yet. These are Super Mashers from FMS. They're a 4.6 tyre, and we had 4.09s on there before, 4.19s. So now we have the stock wheels, which are plastic, which means we don't have that brass under there anymore, and they're heavier wheels I had, but they're much bigger diameter. And generally speaking, bigger tyres give you better capability on the rocks, generally speaking. I've also returned to the stock bumper, which in hindsight, I really should have used at the comp, but that's okay. We're going to run this thing on the 6 problem course today with a 3S 2.2 amp battery. So we're going to get the body on, and gosh, I love how this body goes on. You line it up. There we go. You line it up and just go, and she's on. You can pop the sides in the little steps here. Honestly, that's kind of optional. It just pops on and it's just a beauty. Power switch is behind the wheel here, so you can just flick a finger in and just go, bloom, she's on. Now, the other thing I didn't show you because I was busy running a comp and entering 2 classes and preparing cameras the whole day was a little bit more on the radio. Just briefly, if you've wondered, I said in the video about this car that it's the mid-range of the radios. FlySky has 3 levels of controller for their OEM, which is the original equipment manufacturer, for their OEM line of radios that they give to RTR manufacturers so that a car can come with a radio. They don't currently sell any of the 3 systems to retail. And you might have recalled I said this is the mid-range of the 3 when I did the review, and it is. This is one of the few I have. This is from the Yikong 4106 Pro, which we did a while ago. It looks the same on the side, but the high-end one also has an extra 4 channels on top that the mid-range doesn't have. So you've got a dial and a press button and 2 on-off buttons as well. So the radios are otherwise pretty similar. It's just you get more channels in the big guy. You've got the same controls, just in a similar but slightly different layout. This is the FMS one. And that's pretty much all I wanted to mention about that, just in case you were wondering. It is mid-range, but it purely means less channels. It's the same drag brake, it's the same not active drag brake, I'll add. So if you haven't seen my video where I ran this thing in a competition and still talk to you guys about the car while I was competing, do check that out. I'll put it in the description below, and here's a link to it. Today we're going to run it on my 6 problem course. So we're back at my place today. We're going to put this car across the 6 problems because this is really what the course is made for. Now, people, if you haven't been to my channel before and you're seeing my 6 problems for the first time, it rubs people the wrong way that I call them problems when they're obstacles, and people don't like that the rocks are sitting on top of the ground. I've made them like this so that we can have a distinctive set of problems that challenge the cars with side healing, breakover, how they can approach, have it like approach and departure angles, and how they can get twisted up and get across difficult problems, and then how they can do steep, difficult ascents where not all 4 wheels are on the ground. I've put a bit of thought into it, and that's why I've got a catalogue, if you check my videos, of many cars that have done the 6 problems. So if you don't like that, consider that your 7th problem. I think I've used that one before, but it is the truth. Today, FMS LC80 meets the 6 problem course. Let's do it. And into problem 1. This is the first time I've used these tyres. Larger diameter is going to be helpful. What's their grip like? What's their squish like? They feel like they're single stage foams. All right, this is my 2nd attempt. I don't think my lineup was quite bang on for the first one. There we go. Now it's a fairly top heavy body, and I'll remind you also, we've got straight axles on this car, and although 4.6 tyres are bigger than what I ran at the comp last video, they're still not 4.75s. And truly, every little bit of diameter counts. It all helps. It also wouldn't hurt to have I try to avoid adding weight to cars, and I mean some of the cars I've advised it, but not all of them. If you look at my last FMS FCX10 video, the Blazer, I actually showed you how to make this car crawl amazingly better without adding any mass. We play with the suspension, among other things. So there are other ways to tune a car than just to add mass. But when you have a top heavy body like this, mass certainly will help. Now the suspension is actually working like it should, but I'm not seeing as much squish from the tyres as I'd like. One positive aspect of not having that squish though is that the sidewalls are very stiff, which means it holds itself quite well. If those tyres on the left-hand side had folded then, the car would have fallen. So that actually got it through problem 1, and you don't always want super squishy tyres. So I know when you're looking at upgrades and stuff, you see, you know, really soft rubber, which is a whole nother thing, and you also see super soft foams. Going super soft isn't always what you want. Super soft for the outside ring, let's say, of the tyre isn't bad. It's not bad to have some squish, but you don't want the whole thing to squish, because then your sidewalls can't hold the vehicle up. Now, we're on our side here. Some vehicles would have the tyre speed to get themselves back on their feet there. This vehicle doesn't, because reverse is actually half the speed. Are we in first or second? There we go. Reverse is actually half the speed of forward because they're using half the components called MOSFETs. They're kind of like the power regulators that send power from the battery to the motor. It's a cost-saving design. The high end of this one has it too, unfortunately. And I also noticed just then, it wasn't the servo that was fading, it was the BEC that's built into this vehicle. There was electronic fade then, the servo wasn't steering how I wanted. I was trying to use the wheel to kind of hook the car and help draw it up. When you're doing a climb like this, like the front right wheel is kind of got a nice little grip. You can't quite see it from where you are, but you can steer to the right and it'll help hoik the car up where you want it. Something's not right here. What is it? It could just be my tall battery, actually. So what I'm going to do just to give the servo a hand here is to kill the lights. It's only a small thing, but it's still like, what is it? How many? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 160 milliamp hours of current that's now freed up for the servo, which is not going to be much when it's drawing a few amps, but it's still a few percent at least more that I think it needs. There we go. So I could use the servo to help pull the car over, and I think right there is a thumbnail shot. Hey, that looks pretty good. The other thing I found is the drag brake is fine as long as you're not accelerating. Yeah, when you're accelerating with this car, it doesn't have active drag brake, and I talked about this in the last video. You don't actually have any drag brake if there's any throttle at all. So as soon as I add some throttle, the car just freewheels down the hill. Not ideal. That's problem 2. Right, this is problem 3, and going straight up it is not going to be possible, but I'll try it first because sometimes I'm wrong. The geometry of every car is a little different. Wheelbase, how the steering works, and remember this is servo on axle, which means I also didn't really qualify for the comp when I used it last weekend, but it was for science, so the guys were cool with it. You do get better steering, but worse scale, I suppose you might say, when the steering box is actually on the axle. Now, the bumper is on the ground. There we go, there we go. Okay, so we don't have the center of gravity to pull that one off. That was more of a comp course line, really. So to get, I think I just changed gears by accident then. There we go. Yeah, to get most cars up, you've got to come in from the side on problem 3. And then you're going to need servo, just like on 2, to pull it around and up in just a moment. Now the departure angle here is also tested because right now the bumper is scraping along and vibrating, which is actually holding the car back. Oh dear. Come on. This self-righted plenty of times on the comp day, but we're not having a lot of success here today. Right, let's have another go at that. This bumper is nice in that it bends. It's not supposed to be able to bend for comps, but it bends a bit so I could push the nose of the car into that rock then. Yeah, I think the rear bumper is actually what's giving us grief today, and I don't have high hopes we're going to get over it. I'll make this the last attempt. Yeah, now, unfortunately, the rear is going to grab if I can get the car to fall forwards. This is where some mass would help on the front axle, just to help draw it down. But when it does grab, it's going to push. And this is where overdrive would be helpful as well, because the front can load up a bit and then drag the rear up, rather than having the rear push it forward like a cart, which is, now I'm steering to the right, and it doesn't have the oomph to steer, and I needed it to steer then. So I believe that was a BEC issue. If we can stop from falling, nah. So I just don't have the fine control, unfortunately, and I think I just watched it turn off and on again then too. So just a quick interjection here. Let's get the camera down. This is how easily this body comes off. Turn the thingies and you're off. What I'm interested in right this moment is how hot this is, because it's sending 12 volts. Oh yeah, she's toasty. Motor's warm. Servo, come here, servo. Yeah, servo's warm, motor's warm, but ESC is hot, like burning hot. So it's cooking. 2S would probably be a better answer here for hard crawling for this car. That's my suspicion. But we're testing on 3 because it takes 3, so why not? And I think it could use every little bit of power because it is a fairly underpowered ESC. And the problem is, of course, if you swap the ESC to a 1080 or one of the many other good ones I've recommended over the years, the Holmes and also the Tekin, the little tiny Tekin, and there's another one too that's really good. I'll put them down below if you're interested. The Charisma Arc 2. If you change to any of those, you lose the radio. You've got to change to a different radio. Here's second gear, just for reference. It's got plenty of go. That's maximum reverse. Here's maximum forward. That's maximum reverse. It's slower. Maybe it's like 2/3. It's definitely a lot less than full. Right, over to 4. It's about 94 degrees Fahrenheit today already. It's going to be a bit of a stinker. Right, this is problem 4. I'm keeping those lights off, pretty as they are, because I want every little bit of current available for the servo, which I think it really needs. Now, despite that lid being heavy, and it still may tumble even as I say this, it's actually got a pretty nice center of gravity. I have found this car to be reasonably capable as far as side hilling goes. It's far from the best, but it's also much better than I guess I expected. Partly that's because they're 4.6 and not 4.75 diameter tires, so they're That keeps the mass lower to the ground. And partly because they're straight axles, not portals, which also keeps the mass lower. Of course, you pay for that on breakover, which is what problem 4 is famous for. She's going to get caught up on this rock, where it is right now, and on the next one as well. So our chances of 4 are unlikely, but with a little bit of throttle applied at the right spot, it's still a maybe. Well, no, lost it. Of course, the problem with applying throttle is that you're giving up control ever so briefly and letting physics do its thing, so you just hope that you've got it lined up correctly when you give it a bit. That takes experience and practice. I'm not the best driver out there, although in Australia, yeah, I've got a trophy that says I am, but you know, it wasn't a real huge competition where you're testing against everyone. But suffice to say, if you're new to my channel, I am capable. And I can also tell you I'm very, very consistent. Even when I make mistakes, there'll be consistent mistakes. I'm a very, very consistent driver. So hopefully my catalogue of 6 problem tests will actually be useful, because you're getting the same guy at the wheel, even though I'm on camera and talking, so it's not going to be my best driving. It's going to be close enough to be useful and consistent, which is really what you need for any kind of comparison. 16,000 reverses here. We're going to say 4 is out, even though it probably could do it if I did enough takes and then hid it from you. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say we tried a few times, couldn't do it. This is problem 5 with the FMS FCX10 LC80 or 80 series Land Cruiser. I used to have one of these with the 1HZ diesel engine, 4.2 litre, straight 6, absolutely slow as a wet week. If you didn't put a turbo on it, which I didn't on my old one, bulletproof engine though, just bulletproof engine. It was a tractor pretending to be a car, it's something I've often said. Bit of a rough vehicle it was, but it was in good nick. And I took that thing in places where people had diff locks and all sorts of other stuff. Mine was just an open axle, totally vanilla. The LSD famously sucks in the 80 series as well, so it was... I'm getting all twisted up here. I liked that car. Of course, I swapped it for my 100 series, turbo diesel, IFS. And as much as we all like live axles, IFS gives it really nice road manners, and it is a lovely car to drive. Now we've unlocked a few more ponies with some work on it, but I do like my 80. I miss it. Gave it away, and I understand it's being enjoyed by a family somewhere else in Victoria now, so good for them. Here we go. So 5 shouldn't be a problem, and this is the harder part of 5, but I think the car will do it. So the foams are probably a bit firm, and we're definitely seeing servo fade, which I didn't really have at the comp, but that was one little steering mistake, that was. All right, you might notice the background of the screen has changed to shade because my GoPro turned itself off. She was cooking in this summer heat, which might be hard to picture if you're watching from the Northern Hemisphere. All right. The biggest challenge I have with this car is electronic in nature. It just doesn't quite have the oomph. Now that's on a knife's edge there. I need to get right to clear the high peak, but I need to go left to keep the car from toppling when it's about to go. It's so close to going. I'm on the throttle here. There's very little margin for error. I reckon we might get it, maybe. Come on. This is the best case scenario for this car as well. And notice how much squish there isn't in that back right tire. There should be more. Best case because it's so hot. The rocks are gonna be cooking already. I've placed that now ideally. It almost doesn't count if it can do it, but I just want to see if it can. I don't think it can. All right, so I found an issue. All right, we're gonna say it can't, and I'll show you one of the big reasons why. This is for the towing hitch here, and that's getting all scratched up. It really hooks, it catches on all sorts of stuff. It's a poor design. I wish they had a hole in the bumper instead, or some other way, like hangers that you could remove. Yeah, 5 is out and 4 was out. Let's try 6. This is problem 6, first attempt. Can it be done? That rear bumper might be an issue, but the car is also delightfully low and plenty long. So I found at comp last weekend, it was actually quite predictable when it was climbing. Cutting that rear bumper tow hitch thing off would have been the smart move, but I didn't really want to damage it, because I don't doubt that people are saying this is a great trail car. They'd be right. As much as it's a great crawler, I actually would like to use it on the trail a bit, and I quite enjoy towing, so I could design something better for it. Perhaps I'll do that. It's not going to be for this video, but I'll release it on RC-TNT.com at some point. I'll get a better design towing hitch that's removable, so you can cut this silly thing off and hopefully have the best of both worlds. A better crawler and towing when you want it. That might be the way to go. I'll make it so you can bolt it on underneath the bumper screws or something. Now, smaller 4.6s and no portals. Breakover is everything on this part of problem 6, and we need to get the back wheels up over the top to count. I can see the body's slipped out of that little holder. That's been happening quite a lot today. But the car is getting all twisted up as well. We're asking a lot of it here. This is also the most extreme problem. I know 4 was difficult with its peaks, and 5 with its off balance side heeling, I guess, and breakover. But this is for a straight up climb with a difficult breakover step, like a clearly not scale. When a scale car can do this, and many of them can, you know you've got something that's quite capable. So it's not to say that this is a bad car. It's just not up there with the TRX4 and others that have conquered it. Cross RC, Emo, AT4, JT4. Many of the elements, the Ecto and the Sendero. Even the RGT Pioneer can do it, among others. But I wouldn't count it against this beautiful car if it can't. Now, I'd like to steer right, but I've got no steering, so I'm going to steer left so I don't cook stuff. But we didn't have the strength either in the servo or in the electronics. This is the only line I see. It might do it. I steered left the tiniest bit, and that was the end of it. Can we, there we go. Didn't quite get there. Gee, it was close though. Now I'm cooking in this heat. I found some shade, but I imagine this car is really cooking. Sorry. There we go. Now we'll turn that off. Turn that off. Okay, so I should get my infrared temperature gauge and just stick it on this car just to see. She's very hot. Ooh, yeah, motor's hot now. Servo's actually only slightly warm. What that tells me is that the BEC in this thing is struggling to output sufficient current to that servo, because if it was the servo that wasn't strong enough to steer then, when I remember on 6 then when I had it locked over and I was saying I'm steering and it was just barely moving, if it was the servo that didn't have the power for that and we ran it, it should be really hot, and it's like barely warm. It's just like it's ambiently warm, and this body is really hot still from being in the sun. So if the servo was at its mechanical limit, at its at the limit of its motor basically, with this gearing, it should be quite hot, and it's really not. And this thing is real toasty. So the weak point of this car, there are 3 weak points of this car actually, and they're all centered around this all-in-one receiver, ESC and BEC. Oh, that motor is hot. And that is, 1, there's no active drag brake. So when you're off throttle, and I demonstrated this in the last video, when you're off the throttle, it'll hold, and you've seen that today. When you're accelerating ever so slowly, you want to just creep it forward, you can't. Because if you start to creep forward, as soon as you give it throttle, there's no drag brake, and whoop, she freewheels. So not having that is a problem. Not being able to output sufficient current to the servo is clearly a problem. if you're trying to crawl heavily. A little caveat here before I get to number 3, and that is if you're going to be crawling heavily, you may well be swapping this out for something else. Or you could even just put a BEC on it. Your servo connects here, right? So what you do is you just pull out the middle wire, which is your power wire, pull him out, power the BEC with a jumper from the XT60 here, so that you've got the BEC, just stick that down somewhere where it's not in the way, and then just have the power output from the BEC to join this positive line, the middle wire on the servo, and then the servo will have full power, and it'll still get signal and ground from the ESC, which is then also not having to worry about powering lights and steering at the same time. So that would be the way to go. The third drawback of this car is in this ESC as well, and that is it's got a really, really weak reverse. You've got MOSFETs which only push power one direction, so they'll have a small bank of them, probably 3 for forward, and from how it feels they might have only 2 for reverse. It's a cost-saving thing. MOSFETs are the most expensive component in this little box. They're only worth $1 or so, but you know, you're trying to make $1 when you're selling a car, I suppose. The nicer ESCs will have that full bank of MOSFETs for forward and reverse. They're the black rectangles or squares you see on the, you know, those cheap naked board cheap ESCs you can see where they've just got them there without heat sinks on them. That's what you're looking at. They get hot when they're channeling power, particularly 12 volts or more, particularly when the motor's thirsty. If this was a 25, 21 or 17 turn, this thing would just give up life and pop on 12 volts doing this kind of driving. So 32 turn on a 550 also lowers the amount of absolute power, the amount of current. It's a lower maximum current draw. So it's a weak ESC and BEC. Is it adequate for this car? Well, yeah, I think so. What we just did today was pretty much the maximum this car is designed for. I had this problem on comp day 2. I'm going to have to hunt around and see if I can find these other 2. If you look back in the footage, which I'll have to do, I suppose, we can see when they popped off, but it'll be when it hit upside down or on the side. These only pop in, and they've got LEDs in there, so you don't want to lose them. They just pop in and out with a little catch on each side, so just keep an eye on that. It'd be nice if they screwed in, but then maybe they would have shattered instead of popping off. Pros and cons to everything. Roof rack's plastic. It's got screws that, if they're not done up straight, the thing looks all twisty, but you can just straighten them up. And the body is actually pretty well protected by the bumpers. Holding it, it's fairly neutral in its balance, I think. It's ever so slightly forward biased. The center point is there, so that's actually quite good. Overall, this car is very good, even if it was priced the same as other similar cars. Its closest competitor, I would say, is probably something like the TRX4 Sport and the Red Cat Racing Gen 8 V2. No, the Gen 9 actually, because it has a 2-speed. So the Gen 9 and this are very similar. The Sport doesn't have a 2-speed. That puts this up in my book, and the Sport and this both have 4.6-inch diameter tires. The entire element range is 4.65, so they're all very similar. These are probably slightly too firm, these foams. The tires have excellent sidewall strength though. They really don't bend out like they could have. Like on remember the Red Cat Ascent Fusion? That thing, the tire was just out like that on everything, which is why I developed foams for it that you can print yourself on RC-TNT.com. I've got a lot of stuff on that website, and I'm adding stuff all the time for all sorts of models. I have a mailing list that I haven't ever emailed, but I need to email to you guys that have joined just to let you know what's going on. Overall, I think this is very good. The fact that this car is so much cheaper, I'm in Australia, but it's it's under $500 delivered now, and I paid a bit more than that even. It's really, really cheap. The drive shafts are very tough. I've not had a problem with any of my drive shafts from FMS. The axles are the same axle housings as the Portal ones, without the portals and without the diff locking mechanism. They've got the holes for it. The links are all a nice sturdy steel, and the suspension works beautifully out of the box. As far as stock suspension goes, very nice. Love their wire-free solution. Love this little thing. Don't know how it's going to go with mud and silt, but overall, I like it. For what you get out of the box, this is an excellent value car. There's a link in the description on where you can buy it. I bought this with my own money. It wasn't provided to me by anyone, so I have no... I'm always honest with you guys. I just always am. I promise I always will be too. This is a not negotiable in here because I can't do this channel and be dishonest. I can't. I've got to be able to sleep at night, right? But I like this car. I'll burn a bridge with a manufacturer before I deceive you. But overall, this is an excellent package. It's just my honest opinion. Take it with a grain of salt because I am making YouTube videos, but I'm here to share my love of crawling with you guys, and I'm pretty sure that's come across over the 300 and something videos we've done in the last 3 years so far. So here's to more of that. Powered by, in part, my channel members. Here they are. This is the Scratch Build guys. Thank you so much, guys. I've got 3 tiers, and I think there are 16 or 17 of you now throwing me a few bob each month. That's really generous. I really appreciate that, guys. Thank you so much. That actually, yeah, that actually really helps. It's not cheap running this thing. So thank you very much to them. Please throw me a like if you enjoyed this video. Check my video catalog. You'll find other video on this already, and also on the Blazer, which I've done quite a bit of interesting work with recently. And I think that wraps it up for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time on RC-TNT. Cheers. Oh, look at